A little backstory. Well over a year ago, this gorgeous cat started hanging around in the backyard and hunting birds and squirrels. And over a period of about 5 or 6 months, I was able to habituate it to me and eventually make friends with it and find it a home, and all seemed well. This cat had apparently had some human contact in the past, so it wasn't totally feral. But this cat was active in the daytime. Eventually, after 5 or 6 weeks of feeding it, I was able to break through and make friends with it. To a certain extent, I regret giving it up for adoption, but it has a good home now.
Got some big teeth there, little fella. Yeah, you're a pretty cat, aren't you? You're not gonna scratch me, are you? Yeah, poor little kid.
I was surprised over a year later, when I came back after an extended absence. I was gone about 30 days, to see this amazing cat in the backyard. I almost thought I was seeing a ghost because it looked surprisingly like the other cat. But the other cat was a female, and this fellow was clearly a big tomcat. And I think he was a little surprised to see me in his backyard. If you watched the previous documentary, you know that behind the fence back here is an almost impenetrable jungle, a conservation area. It's full of wildlife. I think that this cat had taken to hanging around in the fire pit next to the fence as sort of his hangout to avoid spending so much time in the jungle. This cat was interesting, clearly related to the other cat in some way because it was just too genetically similar. But this cat would only let you get within maybe 100 feet or so. Here I'm actually shooting through the window, because he was just too flighty. And I'm not sure he actually sees me, but he knows something's going on with the window because it made some noise. So this is filmed right about dusk, and that's about the time when he would come out. I tried to open the door and he immediately ran, even though it was well over 100 feet away. This cat clearly has not had any human contact, or at least he's had bad human contact in the past, because as soon as he sees a human, he equated that with danger and started heading back to the jungle. Everything about this cat was more wilder and different than the previous cat that was obviously related to it. So over several days he would come out in the dusk, and hang out here at the fire pit. And it's interesting because he was not really apparently hunting birds and squirrels like the other cat that was a daytime cat. Here is a good example. These two doves are sitting here probably just 10 feet away in the grass. Pretty easy prey for this big cat. And he's just over there relaxing. Now clearly feral cats eat birds and squirrels, but this particular cat seemed to have a different agenda. He was mostly a night cat. He would come out and relax a little bit in the evening and then head off at night to do hunting. My goal was to eventually befriend this cat and perhaps habituate it, but that was going to be a bit of a challenge. As luck would have it, one day I heard the blue jays making a big commotion, and whenever the blue jays make a lot of noise, something's usually going on. So I went back to the fence and I just peeked over the fence, And I saw the big feral tomcat sleeping in the jungle, right at the edge of the jungle behind the fence. Now he didn't see me, and the wind was blowing toward me, so he couldn't smell me. So I went back and got the camera, and actually, when this video was taken, I was holding the camera above my head with the tilt screen down so I could see, and filming over the fence. So although in the video it kind of looks like he sees me, he really doesn't see me. There's a lot of noise and wind, so he's not smelling me. And this is his daybed. This is where he hangs out in the daytime, right in the edge of the jungle. He doesn't come out into the human area in the daytime because he's obviously a wild cat that doesn't have a good experience with humans. So it was kind of a big breakthrough to find out where he hung out sometimes in the daytime, right at the edge of the jungle. This is a fascinating cat to watch. I'm not an expert on cats, so I don't know exactly what his mixed breed was. It looks like he's looking right at the camera, and maybe he is, but he doesn't know that there's a human there. It's interesting that this cat had a different facial expression than the previous cat. It might have been his sister. This is about a year after I saw the other cat, so it's unlikely. This is a fairly older cat, so it's unlikely that this would be her son. So I think they were probably siblings. Maybe somebody dropped off a litter of mixed Bengal or Savannah and spotted tabby cats in the jungle back there some time ago, and this is the result. I've always enjoyed filming wildlife. When you talk about a wild feral cat like this is just another wild creature that I wanted to study. Now here it made a little bit of noise and he sensed me and he's moved off into the jungle. So at this point I committed to exposing myself and seeing if I could communicate with the cat. My feeble here kitty 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 didn't seem to have much effect on the little fellow. Had a little trouble finding him, but I finally found him. He was keeping an eye on me through the jungle there. And this kind of gives you an idea of just how flighty he is. And then off into the jungle. Now when I say the word jungle, I don't use that term loosely. It is literally a jungle behind the backyard of the conservation area. It was time to go back on the other side of the fence and see where the cat lives. If I was going to learn about this cat, I was going to have to venture into the jungle and set up my camera traps on the jungle side of the fence. Because this strictly nocturnal cat stayed in the jungle all day long. I'm going to go back in the jungle as far back as a human can go. You can see this big old pine tree that's been ripped to shred by animals digging out termites and ants. A feral cat that lives in this environment has got a tough road to hoe with all the other animals around. Not to mention all the disease and insects that would prey upon it. I've gone as far as a human can go back here. The rest is impenetrable palmetto thicket. And this is the habitat that the feral cat has chosen to live in. Interestingly, humans can barely stand back here, but if you go down low in the ground, the palmetto thicket and jungle is just full of all sorts of passageways that small animals can follow. And these are the game trails that the cat and all the other animals of the jungle use. So my plan was to set up a camera trap and food on the other side, right at the edge of the jungle where I saw the cat sleeping. So I started out with a nice, tasty, smelly cat food. Who could resist that? And this is near dusk when to know that this cat usually comes out, about 30 minutes or so before it's totally dark. And sure enough, on the first night, I got lucky and there was the cat. And you can tell by his nature that this is a wild area. He's got to be on the lookout for other creatures. The most likely animals he encounters on a regular basis are raccoons and possums and rats. But occasionally bobcats and coyotes are back in there. But really, this is not good coyote territory. It's just too thick. They prefer an area a little more open. So in a sense, the impenetrable jungle protects him perhaps from coyotes, but there's a lot of other creatures back there. Not to mention the poisonous snakes and the invasive large lizards and whatnot. I suspect that this fellow, to a large extent, lived off of smaller lizards and rats. This was encouraging to have success with the cat on the first night. Eventually my plan was to move the food over on the other side of the fence and see if we could get him to come out earlier in the daytime. Probably the biggest rival to the cat was the frequent, the many big raccoons that live in the area there. On the second night, again, the cat was there not too long after dark to begin eating the cat food. Usually when you put out food on a consistent basis, eventually the possums or the raccoons will be the first to it. So it's kind of interesting that the first two nights, the cat was the first one to the food. And I think that's kind of an indication of the fact that he had started hanging around in the fire pit when I was gone for 30 days. You can see here that he looks reasonably vigorous and healthy. All of this nighttime filming was by remotely triggered night cameras, so I've never seen them. I wasn't watching this in person. On these first 2 nights, he spent a lot of time there making sure that he cleaned up every little bit of the cat food. The fact that he did this 2 nights in a row probably meant that he would be back every night at about this time. And then off deep into the jungle. Armadillos were frequent visitors. But interestingly, they showed no interest in the cat food. On this third night, you can see the cat food is on a piece of bark. And the first arrival is a big wood rat. But if you look closely, you can see large ants, fire ants, crawling on the cat food. And that's something that people don't realize, that fire ants are very active at night, especially when the weather's warm, and fire ants will swarm all over food. So the fire ants, so you can see them crawling, fairly large fire ants actually, crawling on the cat food. And the rat is going over to check out the cat food. Ordinarily the rat would be all over that cat food, but he just got nipped on the nose by a fire ant. And you'll rarely ever see a rat run away from cat food, but fire ants are actually some of the most dangerous and destructive invasive creatures in the forest. Now the cat has shown up a little after the rat. I suspect that the cat caught his fair share of rats, but on this night he just missed the rat. And you can smell that the rat has been there. He's cautiously approaching the food tonight. I think he sees the fire ants. And he tries to go in for a bite. Oh, he got nipped right on the nose. Fire ant bites are one of the most painful things, and most animals, other than possums, are usually not immune to them. So there he is waiting now and contemplating what to do next. If you look carefully, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the large ants swarming all over the cat food and the large piece of bark that it's sitting on. That's a big hunk of tasty, smelly cat food, and there's no way the cat is going to try and eat it with those fire ants on it. Especially after he just took a bite right on the nose. Eventually he gives up. It's morning now, and the cat food is still there, and you can see a little bit clearer all the ants swarming all over it. And the cat has come back toward sunrise to check it out, and he's not going to have anything of it. And you can see that smelly, tasty cat food sat there all night in the jungle, and nobody messed with it. Here's another example of a fire ants getting after a possum from the year before. You can see that possums are pretty tough creatures. They're immune to snake venom for the most part. But he's getting bit by a few fire ants and he's still eating. But eventually, and he's licking his wounds a little bit. But eventually even the possums had enough of being bit by fire ants. He gets up to try and get away from the fire ants and licks his wounds a little bit. Now the next night I didn't put any food out and I sprayed heavily with chemicals around there to kill the fire ants, because they were obviously going to be a problem for this experiment. The thing about fire ants that people don't realize is they're always on the march in the jungle, and they are known to really attack especially ground nesting birds and even, of course, tree nesting birds, because fire ants can go anywhere. So here you can see the setup, the piece of bark where I put the food, and the cat comes by the next day. And we take a day off from giving them food. You can see the fire ants have all been killed and moved on. So we're going to start out tonight with some new food. This night the raccoon is the first on the scene. If you look closely, you'll see ants on there again, but these are the more traditional large wood-eating ants, the red and black ants that hang out in those dead, rotten trees that are around there. Those don't bother the animals. In fact, the animals a lot of times eat those big ants. And Mr. Possum stops by, and he's actually eating some of the ants, licking up some of the ants with the cat food. The native red and black ants, the large ones that live in the trees, are actually a delicacy amongst a lot of the animals. That's one of the reasons those trees are all torn up. Now you can see he's going underneath the bark to get more of the ants, and you can see the ants just spreading all over the place there. Once the possums find a food source, they're pretty persistent at being some of the first to show up and the longest ones to hang around. You probably noticed the food is actually right on the game trail leading back, in the main game trail leading back into the jungle. What's interesting is after being bit several times on the nose several nights before, the cat would never go near that spot again. In fact, from now on, the cat would always go around that area and not use the game trail until he got behind the area where he got bitten. That the other animals that encountered the fire ants, realized they were gone, or maybe they just dealt with it. But the cat, once bitten on the nose like that, he simply would not go back in that area, which means that he would miss out on the food every night. In theory, the cat could easily stake out and eat these squirrels in the daytime if he was so inclined, but as I said before, this cat was strictly a nighttime cat, and being a nighttime cat meant that he really didn't have access to squirrels and birds, which live high up in the trees during the night for the most part. Again, especially when it comes to ground nesting birds and ground nesting mammals, it's the fire ants that have the biggest threat to their nests and to their young. So now it's the later that day, it's almost dusk. There's a big pile of cat food sitting right there, and the cat simply would no longer eat it. In fact, he would never walk on that spot again after he was bitten on the nose several times. He just looked at it and walked around it. Perfectly good pile of cat food sitting right there. Now later that night, as not too uncommon, the possum is now the first one to show up for the food. And again, you can see the area is crawling with big ants that you can even see in the nighttime camera, but those are not the real biting kind of ants. Those are the native black and red wood-eating ants. Apparently the cat had little patience for any ants of any kind, but not the other wild animals of the jungle. They know that when food's available, you gotta eat. And here's a little baby possum. Look a lot like a rat, but they're cute little guys. Possums are actually one of the most beneficial animals you can have around your backyard. One of the reasons it's so difficult to try and feed feral cats, especially at night, is because simply that when you have a consistent food source like this, sooner or later the possums are pretty much going to take over and always be there first. You can see that's a busy game trail. And the main entrance from behind the fence into the jungle behind. The cat stops by, takes a look at it. But again, this is now several weeks into the experiment, and that cat would never set foot in that area again. Always going around and then getting back on the game trail after he's well past where he got bitten on the nose. I'm not a cat expert. I find them fascinating to study and watch, but I'm not really sure what that means. Here a couple days later, the raccoon has shown up just before dusk. And he's not going to waste a bite before he moves on. I think he finally figured out he has to get there a little earlier to beat the possum. Raccoons really don't eat this fast. I just sped up the video in the interest of time. If you watched any of the previous videos about this cat in the previous year, you'll know that some of the raccoons in this jungle get huge, on the order of 10 to 15 pounds. I would have liked to have had more success with this cat, but it just wasn't going to happen. He was a truly feral, wild, nocturnal cat. He had no interest really in humans or human companionship. And the feeding experiment failed because once he was bit on the nose, he'd never feed again. The jungle really belongs to the native wild animals. The feral cat was kind of caught in limbo between two worlds. The human world that abandoned him and was responsible for his plight, and the wild world where he chose to live. This is the last time I ever saw the feral cat. I never even got closer than 100 feet to him, and I never really saw him in person more than 3 or 4 times. He looks a little rough in this last photo. And it's no doubt a rough life. This cat tried to fit in with the wildlife in the jungle behind the house and really didn't bother any of the birds or mammals other than the rats. And I think he probably ate mostly the easy to catch lizards that were abundant in back there, and probably insects. But a cat like this can't really live long in a jungle environment like that. My experience has been 1.5 to 2 years is about as long as they can go. I don't know what really happened to the fellow, but it just disappeared one day. I stopped putting the camera out and haven't seen him since. In fact, I haven't seen another cat in almost 6 months. This is not an environment really where feral cats can thrive. Feral cats really don't belong out here, and it's not their fault. It's the fault of the humans who abandoned them. Regardless of how he got out here, he became a wild part of the environment. It was fascinating to study and watch. This was the last time I saw him in person, as he disappeared into the jungle for the last time.